I'm speaking with Israeli activist Uri Gordon. We're going to talk about the Israeli peace movement. So here it is, 9 months after the Gaza massacre, September. What's going on in Israel?
Well, as you know, if you're following the news, there has been continuous kind of back and forth between the government and the United States around the demand to freeze settlements. It looks like there will be a three-way meeting between American President Obama, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Palestinian President Abbas in the UN in the coming days. But so far it doesn't seem very hopeful. Doesn't look like there's major steps towards a renewal of negotiations. In the meantime, in the areas of the more grassroots struggle, well, the demonstrations and civil disobedience against the separation barrier are continuing in the West Bank. The army has been making a concerted effort to break the will of the popular committee in the village of Bil'in, which has become kind of a symbol of that joint.
What do they do? What are some of the things they do?
Well, there have been nightly raids, there have been arrests of members of the popular committee, beatings, confiscating equipment. This has been happening kind of night after night. And there is now more like a presence of internationals and Israelis in the village at night trying to restrain the soldiers a bit. But this is clearly a politically motivated step attempting to break that struggle.
About how many villages do this kind of thing? There's Ni'ilin, I believe, and are there others that do it?
Well, currently there are kind of between 3 and 5 villages that are that are struggling. I mean, Bil'in, things have been going on for almost 5 years already, demonstrating every week. Ni'ilin is also a struggle that's ongoing, Masra, Salamuna, and then some villages that kind of had been struggling before are now coming back to it, like Bidu and Salem. But overall, throughout the past kind of 5-6 years, there have been up of 20 different villages that have participated in this nonviolent popular struggle.
Now let's talk about some of the groups. You're part of Anarchist Against the Wall. Could you tell us about that?
Anarchist Against the Wall is a group that was founded in 2003 following a joint Palestinian-Israeli protest camp in the village of Masha that was about to, and at the end in fact did, lose 97% of its land to the wall, and 2 farmers from that village invited internationals and Israelis to set up a protest camp on their land that they were supposed to lose, and that lasted for about 4 months and drew up to 1,000 people who came through that protest camp, became a center of information and struggle. And out of that came this group, Anarchists Against the Wall, which is a group that participates along with the Palestinian popular committees in those villages in those actions of civil disobedience and nonviolent struggle against the wall. It is a solidarity group. We are Israelis trying to show that we and our Palestinian counterparts are refusing to be enemies. We are cooperating together to bring justice to this country.
There's another interesting group, fairly new, Shmonistim. Could you tell us about that?
Well, the Shmonistim, meaning high school graduates, they're in their last year of high school. Every year for the past few years there has been a letter that has been signed by high school graduates who are declaring their refusal to go and serve in the occupied territories, to participate in the occupation. That letter is sent to the Prime Minister, and then many of them end up, being court-martialed, serving jail time, but finally being discharged and not doing their army service, or at least not serving in the occupied territories. Some of them refuse to serve at all in the army, some of them just refuse to serve in the occupied territories, but in any event it's kind of sending a message from Israeli youth that they refuse to be part of that, and they're trying to create something different.
Now, is this a small or tiny or large force, would you say?
I'd say it's somewhere between small and tiny. Overall, it's it's unfortunate, but the Israeli peace camp is small and marginalized in Israeli society. A lot of people would consider us, traitors or things like that. A lot of people just don't want to think about politics and don't want to think about what's going on, and are quite happy for their government to insulate them from what's happening in the West Bank and Gaza. Unfortunately, it seems like the public is kind of edging more and more to the right over time, fueled by, a sense of existential fear, a sense of victimhood and this very dark collective trauma from the Holocaust that I think that is being perpetuated to a degree in Israeli public culture and mass psychology to make Israelis feel constantly threatened so that they do not demand that their government stops its occupation of the Palestinians.
Let me ask you something about your personal background. Since dissent is not such a common position in Israel, how did you come about with that point of view?
Well, I came from a family that was always kind of, at least to a moderate degree, in the peace movement, and I always identified with, ideas like a Palestinian state and a peaceful solution in the region. But a lot of it for me also came from being able to tie together various agendas. Like I became an environmentalist quite early on. I studied about capitalism and learned about its injustices and became kind of a socialist or a social anarchist quite early on. So really for me the occupation is just this local case that I'm involved in and implicated in of an injustice, and it's just one facet of the various forms of injustice that I seek to confront in my life. As an anarchist, I oppose all forms of domination, all forms of discrimination and hierarchy. So this is just the most evident one in the region where I live, and so I have the responsibility to oppose it.
How about Israeli writers? I mean, we hear about Amir Haas and Gordon Levy. How about novelists? Are there some courageous Israeli novelists? Who are you reading?
Well, let's see what I can answer you. I mean, Amir Haas and Gordon Levy, they're journalists, right? Novelists, I can't really say that there are any major novelists who have really taken, a powerful, radical stance on what's going on. There are these novelists like Aleph Bet Yoshua, Amos Oz, and David Grossman, who are kind of the considered Israel's top novelists, and they're progressive. They are supporting peace, but still from quite a Zionist point of view, and it's very easy for them also to kind of toe a line with the government, especially when wars are going on. So I'm kind of reserved about them kind of becoming the outwardly popular voice of the Israeli peace movement. I don't think they represent me, but it's better than being right-wing and being supportive of the occupation, so that's already something, right?
What about some websites in Israel, maybe in art or literature or anarchism, anything that our people might be interested in going to?
Well, the website of Anarchists Against the Wall is awalls.org. That's one website with continuous information about our activities, and there's like every demonstration that we participate in usually is videoed and kind of put on there and on YouTube and other sites just afterwards. Another good website belongs to an organization called the Alternative Information Center. This is a joint Palestinian-Israeli organization. They have offices both in Jerusalem and Beit Sahur, which is next to Bethlehem, and they do a lot of publishing and reporting, and their website is alternativenews.org, and that also provides kind of continuous reportage and so on. Other sites to look at are Electronic Intifada, I think you can just look that up, and that has also news and reports from what's going on. There's a few good organizations to look up if you're interested in finding allies in Israel for the struggle for Palestinian rights. One is the Women's Coalition for Peace, which brings together several feminist and anti-militarist organizations. The Women's Coalition for Peace has been at the forefront of resistance to the occupation for many years. There's a good organization called New Profile, which is an organization which is, again, a feminist anti-militarist organization that supports refuseniks and kind of gives them accompaniment throughout their process of refusing and sometimes being jailed. And another few organizations, there is an organization called B'Tselem, which is the Israeli Human Rights Coalition, and they do a lot of monitoring of human rights abuses in the West Bank. An organization called Bimkom, which is Planners for Planning Rights. A lot of it has to do with the situation of land ownership and land takeovers in the West Bank, but also things inside Israel when it comes to poor communities' rights and things like that. And of course, the Israeli Independent Media Center, which is israel.indiemedia.org, is a great resource.
Well, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you for having me. Take care.